The most holy place, which is the top end of that white rectangle there, the most holy place, or the Sanctum Sanctorum, was a perfect square, which is significant to us in geometry. It was 20 by 20 by 20. The Holy of Holies was visited only once per year, only by the high priest, and it was done on the Day of Atonement. The three walls, which would be, in this case, the top and the two sides, were made of polished gold. That last wall facing down, and this representation was, of course, that curtain we were talking about. This was the home for the Ark of the Covenant. The significance of that, of course, was that the Ten Commandments were in there. And I really want you to think in terms of a people who have been captured and held by the Egyptians, multi-god polytheists. And you've now been visited personally by your own God and given this gift to Moses. We are now holding the Ten Commandments that came straight from God. In that ark is also Aaron's rod, which was used to perform miracles in front of Aaron, or in front of the Pharaoh, to get them out of Egypt. Some accounts also, some do, some don't, said that there was a sample of manna from heaven there, which we all know is what at one point they were eating in the desert in the absence of other food. This will give you just a little bit better idea. Step out of the way here. If you were to come in from the bottom end, that gives you a better look at what the courtyard would look like. Once again, there's a bunch of goat-hide curtains that were up around the outside. This really isn't a building, it is still a tent at this point. I kind of came up with my little coined term here. At this point, although a mobile society, I think that the Israelites were in what I would call a theocentric universe. The reason for that, if you have a look at this, this is actually a picture of how the tabernacle would be set up when they came to camp. This was still a mobile society. The sanctuary and the tabernacle were set up in the center, and as you can see, you've got three tribes over here, three at the top, three at the bottom. There was an organizational system for how the 12 tribes would arrange themselves around the tabernacle when they came to camp. So in terms of organization, their social lives, everything that they did, had the tabernacle at the center. And strategically, there was a great deal of wealth, or at least to the desert people, there was a great deal of wealth involved there. If you're going to come and take this, it's at the center of our world. You're going to have to go through a bunch of people and get to it. And once again, this was something that, contrary to what was the practices of the day, all of the previous religions and the religions of all their neighbors were all multi-god religions. And that's what really set the Jewish people apart, of course, is that they had founded a monotheism. Going beyond the tabernacle, King David proposed that there should be a more permanent housing for the Ark of the Covenant. He saw that the tabernacle was good, but he wanted to make something that was going to be a more permanent temple for them. He instilled the same love of God, the same rituals, the beliefs, and he used the previous tabernacle as the template for that. He copied that pattern, if you will. David had focus, and he had focus on three things. He needed to gather wealth. He needed to conduct the duties that he had to his people, to his God, of course, and he needed to make plans for the temple. Something that doesn't become clear to me, and once again, as a person who's not really a student of the Bible, you read about the kings of the Israelites, the kings of the Jews all the time. This was really early on in the game, and I hadn't realized it until I started doing my research. King David was only the second king of the Jews. Apart from that, they had kind of a loose confederation of tribes, and they had decided to make the step towards whether or not they actually wanted to have a king. The first king was Saul, and the second king was David. David was a warrior king. He took the throne when he was 37 years old, which was 1020 BC or so. According to biblical accounts, to give you an idea of what his kingdom encompassed, it was stated that he had 1,300,000 fighting men under his belt, 1.3 million, and that's just in warriors, so to speak. He had fashioned an alliance with the Phoenicians, and he took control of east-west trade routes went through the city of Jebus, I'm never quite sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He made trading with Egypt possible by conquering the Philistines, and he also had a great deal of the spoils of war that came from the Syrians, the Hittites, the Ammonites, and a lot of other ites that he stepped on in his warmongering. David was a king on a large scale, and he demanded a great deal of tributes. For those that aren't familiar with what tributes were, tributes are kind of an acknowledgement of vassalage. If I overtake your country, or I have power over your country, then annually, usually annually, you would make a contribution to the coffers of my kingdom. Not only do I get money out of that, but it's a conscious acknowledgement every time you pay that I'm still the master of this place. And like I said, he had a great deal of ground for the lot of tributes that were paid. He also formed an alliance, helping take control of trade routes, most of which went through Jerusalem. This gives you an idea of how big an area David and his son Solomon eventually controlled. The other portions are Phoenician areas, which was an ally of David, but not necessarily part of his kingdom. David passed on to his son Solomon a vast empire, as you just saw in that last slide. Also, untold wealth that he had already accumulated. They had plenty of money. Strategic control of trade. They had all of the trade that was going in and out of Jerusalem. And how much money goes through, you're going to make something as it passes. Acquired an ongoing tribute. You have a number of, I guess I'm using a more medieval term, but there are vassal states out there that are paying you, and that's not going to stop. That's an ongoing process. He has also passed on to you peace with the world. David was a warmonger who was so good at it that when he was done, there was no more war. The region had been established with equilibrium. He had passed on a peaceful world with Solomon. He also passed on the ideas for building the temple. But he himself was not able to build the temple. And a couple of sources that I've read said that because David was a warmonger, because he was a warrior king, there was frankly just too much blood on his hands for it to be proper for him to be the one to build the temple. So although he accumulated everything that he needed for it, he needed to pass that torch on to Solomon. The location of the temple is very significant. It was actually built on Mount Moriah, which is an eminence of Mount Zion. This place came under control of the Amorites. Their principal city was Jebus, which eventually became Jerusalem. The actual property, the site where the temple was built, was owned by Ornan the Jebusite, and was actually purchased from him by King David. The foundation was laid in 1012 BC. It was completed in 1004 BC. I think according to Masonic tradition, it usually takes 7 years. Pretty close. The temple's location, and to count my point, I'm going to jump up here. This is Jerusalem right here. In terms of selecting a place to build the temple, from a practical standpoint, you could have done a better job. Where he built the temple, Jerusalem is here. He's 14 miles from the Jordan River. He's 14.5 miles from the Dead Sea. He's 41 miles from the Mediterranean.